Going through a series called I Pray, and last week I talked about prayer, and I challenged you. I don't know if you were able to remember that this week and follow through with it, but I'm challenging you that you read the Psalms this summer. There's a lot of them, and you don't have to just read one a day because there's a lot of them. You can listen to them. You know, that you might have an audio Bible, or you can read them. And the second thing I'm challenging you to do is to meditate after you read them and before you pray, and then to pray. And I'm challenging you to pray not only in the morning, but in the evening. And you might not have time to do the readings in the morning and the evening, but do the prayer. Pray when you first get up and pray when you go to bed. And do it with greater expectation. That's what I'm encouraging us to do that. So last week we talked about prayer of thanksgiving and how that should be a start for us when we pray. But there's also a prayer that I'm going to call it prayer that groans. Okay, I remember when we went on this trip, we had hiked all day, and I'd hiked up the mountain, and we went out to eat. And after we got up from eating, I made this noise. You ever make a noise when you get up? And people will go, "What's that?" And I didn't even know I made it. Sometimes you groan, and sometimes things happen in life that makes you groan. Last week I talked about how prayer is the plumb line to the deep things of God, like a ship throws out a line, used to find out the depth of the water, find out what God is really like. Prayer will lead you that way. There is absolutely nothing so great as prayer. And you might say something to me today. You might say, "Well, I'm not sure exactly what I believe." That's okay. I'm glad you're here. There's a book. I'm recommending a few books as we go through this. This one is a terrific book. It's called How to Pray, A Simple Guide for Normal People. All right? A lot of the prayer books that are out there are really old, but this one is new, and it's a good one by Pete Greig. And he talks about the story of this woman, Kathy. He said, Kathy was a friend of mine. She was a militant atheist. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it's not good. At the University of Wichita, when late one night, where she lived in her room, she was gazing down at her sleeping baby. She just had a baby. And she was overwhelmed with a desire to give thanks to someone or something for this gift of all gifts. She says, "I was without a husband or boyfriend in my life who I could share this sense of wonder." And she whispered a few self-conscious words of gratitude out at night into the silence. And as she did so, she said the atmosphere seemed to change. Wave upon wave of love, anything like I'd ever experienced before, came flooding into my room and into me. She says, I was afraid to breathe because it might stop. And she knelt that night beside her sleeping baby, and she accepted Christ into her heart. And that was 30 years ago, and she's still following Jesus. Prayer can lead you to God. Don't think you can't pray if you're not ready. You just pray, okay? And so last week we talked about prayer that sings and dances. What I meant by that is it's thanksgiving, that when you just celebrate something God has done, or just the fact that He exists, or the things that He's blessed you with, and you start, a lot of times your prayers with thanksgiving, and that's an important part of what we do when we come together is we thank God. But there's also the kind of opposite of that. Prayer that groans. I'm going to call it lament. Lament. And I think this is important. Now, we don't use this word lament very often. Lament is a passionate expression of grief, sorrow, and regret. It's an emotional thing. And the Bible was filled with laments. You could say, well, I don't know if we ought to be lamenting to God. Listen, Jesus did. You know, he said on the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? There was a time in Jesus' life when he went to see a friend, and they had asked him to come and heal Lazarus, and he was late getting there. And so then they just basically invite him to come to the funeral. He'd already been dead. And so they invite him to the funeral, and he comes, and Lazarus' sister is there, and she looks at him, knowing who Jesus is, and she said, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't be dead. And he didn't rebuke her for voicing that lament, that grief and sorrow and regret. Sometimes we get afraid of doing it because you get afraid you're going to get stuck in it. No, you don't get stuck in it. It's a part of getting out of it. Now, a lot of times in church especially, and maybe on Christian radio, you have precious moments theology. You know what that is? Some of y'all probably have the little precious moments figures, okay? And sometimes it'll have a Bible verse on them, and they're sweet, you know. But not all of the Bible is precious moment verses. There are verses that talk about other kinds of emotions, other kinds of feelings. I mean, we can take these verses that we celebrate and put them on a plaque or put them on a poster or put them on a bumper stickers. But there are other verses in the Bible that are painful. About 40% of the Psalms are lament. Okay? That's a lot. And so, how should we take that? Well, there's a scholar, go for it a couple of slides if you would, named Walter Brueggemann. Thank you. He is a terrific, he's wrote over 100 books about the Old Testament. I mean, he passed away this year, but he knew so much about the Old Testament. And he wrote a book in which he talked about the three kinds of prayers in the Bible. And it helped me understand it a little bit. First, he said there are prayers of integration. This is kind of like the ones we put on the plaque. And one of them is Psalms 1. This is a wonderful psalm. In fact, I memorized it because I loved it when I was growing up. It's, how blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor sit in the seat of scoffers, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in that law he shall meditate day and night, and he will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. But the wicked are, and I missed a couple, sorry. It's been a while since I quoted it. Which leaf does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. But the wicked are not so, but they're like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. This is a terrific psalm. The good are rewarded, the bad suffer. Things work out really well. It's a terrific, inspiring psalm, and prayer is what it is, because the Psalms are like the church prayer book. There's also prayers of disintegration. We call them sometimes laments. In fact, there's a book in the Bible called Lamentations, filled with these kinds of prayers. There's expressions of grief. And one of them, let's look at it, Lamentations 3, verses 1 through 17. I am the man who has seen affliction. Because of the rod of his wrath, he has driven me and made me walk in darkness and not in light. Surely against me he has turned his hand. Repeatedly all the day he has caused my flesh and my skin to waste away. He has broken my bones. Nobody ever put that on a figurine. He has besieged me and encompassed me with bitterness and hardship. In dark places he has made me dwell, like those who have long been dead. He has walled me in so that I cannot go out. He has made my chain. This is a chain that weighs him down. Even when I cry out and call for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my ways with hewn stone. He has made my paths crooked. He is to me like a bear. He's talking about God. Lying in wait, like a lion in secret places. He has turned aside my ways and torn me to pieces. He has made me desolate. Now, I don't believe he actually believes this, but he feels this. And he's lamenting honestly what he's going through. He says, I've become the laughingstock to all my people, their mocking song all the day. He has filled me with bitterness. He has made me drunk with wormwood. He has broken my teeth with gravel. He has made me cower in the dust. My soul has been rejected from peace. I have forgotten what it means to be happy. I have forgotten happiness. And it's appropriate that we talk about Psalms like this today, particularly because you may not know this, but today is it June 29th in the Christian calendar. Today is the day of Christian martyrs. Churches all over the world celebrate, and I don't know if the word is celebrate, remember the people who have given their lives. You know, on Memorial Day, we remember the soldiers who have given their lives. On today, the day of Christian martyrs, we don't remember the people who have just done a lot for Jesus. We remember the people who died for Jesus. And it wasn't just people in the ancient world. It was people recently. There's a guy that he used to be a head of the Church of England. His name is Justin Welby. And he tells this story. It's a moment when he was overwhelmed. This is a true story. He said, a few years ago, I'm just going to read what he wrote about it. I went with my wife to a town in Africa, which was in the middle of a civil war. This town had been taken and retaken 4 times in the previous month. We went up to it in a single-engine aircraft. When we landed, there was nobody there at the airport. It was an airstrip. There were some soldiers and a pickup. We got in the truck and we drove off the airfield. And as we drove off the airfield, immediately I could see bodies lying in the ditch, on the roads, in the houses. There were 3,000 unburied bodies. They were driving him to the church. When they got to the church, it was in ruins. It had been burned. And the bodies of the minister and his family were laid out by a huge pit. And he says, I didn't know I was going to have to do this, but they said, would you please consecrate the grave, and then we'll put him in it. And he says, how do you pray a prayer of consecration for a mass grave with the bodies of women and children who had been slaughtered? A simple prayer that everything is okay, it does not fit. What do you say when the world has gone wrong? Because sometimes we live in a broken world. I mean, you can pay attention, and and it's going to come in on you eventually. You're going to experience that brokenness personally. Maybe it'll be your fault, maybe not. Maybe it's just circumstances that happen. And at that time, polite prayer doesn't work. Yeah, you should be respectful and be in awe whenever you pray, but the Bible talks about bringing your whole heart to God. being honest. And so there are prayers of disintegration, prayers of what happens when terrible things happen. And you're able to see that in the Bible, a lot of in the Psalms, the book of Lamentations. It's there. And it's okay to be honest with God when you have those thoughts, because the truth is, He knows what you're thinking anyway. Why should you hide it from Him and say, oh yeah, everything's great? Now, the third kind of prayer that Professor Brueggemann talks about is prayers of integration, prayers of disintegration, and then prayers of reintegration. Now, we're glad that they're there. Even in the book of Lamentations, which is the whole book means wailing and sorrow. But even in that book of sorrow, right in the middle of it, there's these words. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. That's where we get it from. That God is faithful and will be there even when you go those terrible times. I mean, look at the Apostle Paul. We think of him as being so successful, but you know, all the terrible things that happened to him. He got stoned, people trying to kill him. He had shipwrecked, he was whipped, and he wound up getting, crucified for his faith and following Jesus. He was one of the first martyrs. By the way, martyr means witness. He was a witness that died being a witness. But here's what he wrote in prison. He said, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to the frustration not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning, prayer that groans, as in the pains of childbirth, right up into the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for the adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we have been what? Saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have. We wait patiently. In the same way, the Spirit helps us. We don't know what we ought to pray for. By the way, I could give you a pattern, and I may give you a pattern for how to do a lament. But the truth is, it's just you pouring out your heart to God. The Spirit Himself will intercede for you through wordless groans even. Sometimes something happens that's so bad, all you can do is go, I can't believe that happened. And He who searches our hearts knows the minds of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that, this famous verse, in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, have been called according to His purpose. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among the many brothers and sisters. And those He predestined, He also called. Those He called, He also justified. Those He justified, He all glorified. And then, who shall separate us? Or He said, what we shall say in response to this? He said, if God is for us, who can be against us? So how do we lament? If this is something that we ought to do, this pastor's that I quoted a few minutes ago, his wife was leading a group of women, teaching them something about the Bible and about God, and in Africa. And in the area that she was doing this, there had been this serious war, and many of them had had loved ones that were killed in the war. They had seen terrible things. people who were violated, things that happened to affected the whole community. And since all of them in the church had seen this and experienced this, they came together one night, and she said, listen, I want to talk to you about what lament is, what it's about, and that it's okay to pour out your heart to God. And she said, these women were so lovely. She said they were so nice, kind. They were always smiling. They were always in a good mood. And she knew that inside, though, that they were hurting from all the things that they'd seen. And so she said, tonight it's okay to voice that to God. And she said, we had a prayer time. And she said, I've never seen people cry so hard in my life. One woman laid down on the ground and started crying. That was good for them to reveal those. God already knew what they were going through. Now, you don't stay in that experience. Over and over again in the Psalms, there's a pattern of lament prayers in the Bible. Basically, it goes like this. You turn to God. You bring your complaint, the thing that you have seen or experienced that you don't understand. Ask for God to heal you and help, and trust in his faithfulness. But don't worry if you can't remember this pattern. Just know that it's not just complaint. You don't end the prayer with complaint. That's part of what it is. You ask for his help, and in the end, great is God's faithfulness. You know, there was one man that has written a book on this. He's a scholar. His name is Emmanuel Katangoli, and he has written on what has been going on in Africa and in some of the political upheaval and terrible things. And he's written about the response that Christians should have for it. And he talks about lament. In a book he writes about lament, he said this: the loss of lament signals a loss of passion for social justice. A church that has lost its nerve to lament before God will likely lack the nerve to confront oppression and be prone to support the status quo. When we come together, we sing songs and we celebrate, and that's a good thing. It's also a good thing to lament. You see some of the things that have gone on in our broken world, things that don't make sense, you know. Now, you don't live there. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death. When I go and get my blood pressure checked, I try to think of something peaceful. Do you? I mean, when you're getting your blood pressure, I get nervous anyway when they check it. Well, recently I've been thinking of this picture that we took on our trip. I was sitting on the porch of this little tent cabin that we were in, and the sun was going down, and it was beautiful, and it was quiet, and I felt at peace. And I remember this psalm. Say this psalm with me. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yes, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I thank God that we get to celebrate and be thankful. I also thank God He's big enough to let us be honest and voice our laments, knowing that in the end, He has His peace and hope and joy and love to heal us.